Nelson Mandela clearly enjoying the reception.
Now, if he thinks the reception is going to be warm and noisy outside, well, he's got a pleasant surprise in store inside the centre, where thousands of youngsters have been rehearsing for days, nay, weeks, for this special day. We're going to hear some music. They're just being told, I think, that the President has arrived. Now, we're seeing the sports hall at the Brixton Recreation Centre, which is upstairs in this particular building. So at the moment, the President and the entourage are making their way in a lift, no doubt specially checked out for the occasion. And he's going to emerge on the balcony of this particular arena, where he will then take a moment to enjoy the performance that's been prepared. The youngsters there, all geared up. I wouldn't mind betting that's going to turn into a South African flag before long. That's a group of youngsters all clutching their pieces of plastic. But we're going to hear from the youngsters band. More presentations, of course, to come as well, as Prince Charles takes time to explain the projects that have gone underway for the Prince's Trust in general, and then the particular projects that they've been engaged in here in Brixton.
Stay with us. We'll continue our live coverage in a moment.
As to the balcony level of the Brixton Recreation Centre, that's our shot over the assembled guests there. Youngsters and musicians too, all ready to perform for the President in the presence of Prince Charles, of course. And we'll pick up our coverage there as he makes his way upstairs to that balcony.
And joining us now in the studio is Donald Woods, the former South African exile and journalist who's campaigned lifelong against apartheid and followed the plight of Nelson Mandela. A remarkable occasion for him, this. He seems to have very much enjoyed his visit, and this the culmination of the trip.
He's having a great time. He's enjoyed himself from the minute he got here. And he loves particularly walking in among people, and especially young people. So I think this is going to be probably the high point of his stay.
Now, of course, he's at the Brixton Recreation Centre. That was built as a result of the race riots there in the 1980s. How important, how significant will it be for him to be in Brixton at this time? I
think very important, because lots of South Africans have an image of Brixton, and indeed lots of British people have an image of Brixton, which isn't entirely accurate. I mean, really think this is really ghetto town or grot town. They're lovely parts of Brixton, and I think this will be an opportunity to show people that.
An eye-opener. He's also going to talk to people about race initiatives. What kind of, how hard do you think he'll be working to leave an impact which is concrete, to actually do something to help people there?
I think that he does that automatically. You know, he just, by going to these places, one always hears this phrase, what you see is what you get, with Nelson Mandela. The very fact that he goes there will leave many of these young people with an indelible impression of someone who really does care.
Tell us your impressions of the man.
Well, you know, he bowls you over when you meet him, because he's such a calm centre, he's such a still person, and he is so warm, embraces you readily. He seems always to be genuinely glad to see you, although this must be the same for so many people during the course of the day. Also has a lovely sense of humour, and readily switches. When my wife and I met him briefly a couple of months ago in South Africa, and I spoke to him in Xhosa, because we come from the same birthplace, and indeed so does my wife, but her Xhosa is a bit more rusty than mine. And then he embraced her and started talking to her in Xhosa, and she said afterwards, I wish I'd brushed up on it a bit. So he's a very human person, very warm, and I think that what gets across to people, especially in Britain, is this impression of someone who's utterly at ease with himself.
He wants to thank the people of Britain for their support during his years of exile and also generally in the fight against apartheid. How significant was the British people's role in that?
Well, he emphasizes when he says that he's talking about those many British people who supported the anti-apartheid movement, the trade unions, the politicians, particularly the Labour and Liberal Party politicians, and some conservatives, but particularly not those conservatives who thought he was a terrorist or who thought sanctions would do more harm than good. Indeed, he points out, as do many of us who are on that side, that if we'd had sanctions a bit earlier, we would have saved more lives in that conflict. So when he's thanking the people of Britain, he's thanking those that he knows the soul of the country really was behind him. It was just a few fairly right-wing politicians who were out of line.
John Major wouldn't be included in that bank of politicians that didn't support him, but he seemed very pleased to meet him, John Major himself,
yes,
having come from Brixton and having worked quite hard on race initiatives. Is that your impression?
Absolutely. John Major's got a good image among South Africans, and he's liked because they contrast him with what went before, Mrs. Thatcher, you see. So he comes up looking very good in that contrast.
And the relationship between the two men there?
Very good indeed. They are friendly. They're on first-name terms. They joke and talk a lot together at the luncheon at Downing Street. They obviously got on very well. And they share an interest in sport, which is very important to both countries.
Donald Woods, thanks very much indeed for the moment. We'll come back to you a little later as our live coverage of the visit to Brixton continues.
We can tell you, as you might have seen a little bit earlier, that President Mandela has arrived at the Brixton Recreation Centre. These were the pictures shot by Sky cameras just a few moments ago of a presentation to Princess Zanani and a handshake from the President. That'll be a red letter day for that little girl. Prince Charles standing there too. Now, at the moment, the President and his party are meeting various other dignitaries. The Commission for Racial Equality, represented by Herman Ousley, Julia Cleverdon from Business in the Community, and the Runnymede Trust is represented by Trevor Phillips. They're all guiding him through a display in another room at the Recreation Centre, illustrating pieces of work by different groups who have been working with ethnic minorities in the United Kingdom. President pausing, enjoying a joke with Prince Charles, taking his time, as we have seen throughout his visit this morning, during his last 3 days. Now, back in the hall, where the London Gospel Community Choir, I beg your pardon, the London Community Gospel Choir and the Walnut Tree Walk School are lined up to perform some music today. And as you might have heard in our coverage from the concert last night, which in fact raised a lot of money for the Prince's Trust and from all work such as the President is seeing today, the musicians there say that this is a President who, like, in their own words, to get down. He likes to shimmy a bit. We've seen him dance. I think it was in the first morning he was here, about 7:30 in the morning in Green Park. He was planting a tree and some musicians were attending then, and the President obliged with a little shimmy and a bit of a two-step or more. He enjoyed the concert again last night, up on his feet there at the Albert Hall, and I'm sure he'll enjoy the presentation that the folk of Brixton have been preparing for some time.
Donald Woods, you say this is very much the personality of the man, the party spirit.
Oh, yes. Although he's quiet by nature, he's very convivial, and as you noticed, he likes to dance. He moves very well. You know, you've got to remember he's 78, and I think he's a remarkable figure of a man for that age, and quite athletic. It's said that in all the years in prison, for 27 years, that his weight never varied by so much as half a stone, and apparently did very strenuous exercises every morning.
I was going to say, he was known, wasn't he, for adopting quite a vigorous regime
Absolutely,
of keep fit
yes.
and PT, and still does to an extent.
Oh, he does, yes, he does. And I overheard him on Tuesday, someone offered him some snacks, and he said, No, I've got to keep my health and my shape right.
Well, I'm not surprised on these state visits with all the rich food around.
Now, the Prince's Trust has done a lot of work to help people from ethnic minorities. How do President Mandela and Prince Charles get on?
I believe they get on well, again, because, you know, the South African people and the British people have certain cultural, very important cultural things in common, like cricket and rugby. And so, and also, I think that Mr. Mandela likes individual members of the royal family, and the fact that the Prince started this trust will be of special interest to him. I think that's one of the reasons why I asked to see this place. Because in South Africa, we're going to need a lot of similar redevelopment schemes, and I think this may be taken as a model for such a scheme in some of the townships.
Indeed, this visit has been something of a campaign for investment in South Africa as well. How successful has that side of it been?
It's impossible to say at this stage yet. I think they'll only really know in a couple of months when all the final investment requests are in. But my guess would be that they'll do well out of it, because although South Africa has its problems at the moment, including some labor problems and crime problems, it has a tremendous infrastructure and it offers a lot to the investor.
Well, eager anticipation in Brixton Recreation Centre. The balloons have been made ready. He certainly has been impressed, and I think, and enjoyed his trip to Britain this week. Mr. Mandela was quoted earlier in the week as saying, once he'd arrived, "I expected a warm reception, but nothing quite like this. The hospitality from the royal family, the government and the people is beyond words. I did expect a warm welcome, but it actually happened exceeded my wildest expectations." Well, I'm sure the people of Brixton and later folk in Trafalgar Square will be anxious to top off this state visit with maybe exceeding even wilder expectations. "I wish I could come to Britain every week," said Mr. Mandela. But something which would no doubt be impracticable. Also, he does, I'm sure, look forward to getting back home, not least because he adopts, Donald, quite a busy regime, 12, 13, 14 hours work as president. There's so much he wants his country to get on with now, and he wants to be the catalyst and the source of inspiration to get some of the drudgery of government underway as well.
This is no figurehead president. He really does get involved, and he really wants to see more happening. You know, he took over at a time of tremendous expectation, and luckily a lot of the people are realistic enough to know that he can't work miracles, but he does want them to see significant improvement in their lives soon.
Now, just a reminder, you're tuned to Sky News, special coverage this morning of the state visit of President Nelson Mandela, the last day of his official visit to Britain. We're in Brixton. This is the Brixton Recreation Centre. Hundreds of guests lined up on the floor of the sports hall there, and we're expecting the President and Prince Charles, who is his host this morning, to appear on the balcony just to the right of your picture in a little while. And then a musical performance, more music for the President. The London Community Gospel Choir are going to perform for him, and also some music from the Walnut Tree Walk School. And once that's underway and some more presentations have been made, the President due to leave the hall here and make his way outside to meet the people of Brixton, in particular going to the local street market there. He's scheduled to make an official greeting by the leader of the Market Traders Association, but no doubt he'll spend some time with the people in the marketplace too.
The culmination of what has been a historic and euphoric visit by Nelson Mandela, which included, of course, Donald, yesterday, his address to Parliament.
Yes, that was a really stirring address, and it was very historic too. And I love the fact that it wasn't all charm. You know, there was some blunt words there, but he emphasized we come as friends. This room we're looking at too is what the ANC used to do fundraising, indoor football matches there. And one remembers certain wounds in the course of that duty on that very floor.
We can see here pictures of the parliamentary address. How much would that have meant to Nelson Mandela?
he's always been conscious of the history of this country, and being in the Great Hall of Westminster, where people like Sir Thomas More were tried and King Charles I, and you know, where the kings gathered for so many hundreds of years, I think really was something in his mind as he stood there, listening to the tributes. And again, he was utterly still. He just, it all washes over him. He takes it on board, but doesn't react immediately to it. And he was, I noticed him looking up at that remarkable roof, you know, the carved roof there. And of course, the band were playing mixture of Welsh tunes, Irish tunes, Scottish tunes, English tunes. And all of that would not have been lost on him. I think he enjoyed every minute of it.
Because of his period in exile?
And before that even, when young educated blacks in South Africa, like himself, who'd been to places like Fort Hare University, Healdtown Institute, Darkbury and other places, and then ultimately became a lawyer in Johannesburg, a lot of their studies were patterned on, like for instance, our criminal law in South Africa was patterned on English criminal law. So as a law student, he would have studied criminal law very similar to English criminal law. So he'd be conscious of the historical links between the countries as well. And as he referred to them in his speech, he was referring to the colonial era, you know, the complaints they had against Britain as the colonial power, but always coming back as a friend.
Well, Donald, for the moment, thank you very much. Those are the pictures of yesterday, a great occasion at Westminster Hall, enjoyed by all who were there. Let's go back now to live pictures today. We're in Brixton with President Mandela and his daughter and his entourage. His host today is Prince Charles, and it's the work of the Prince's Trust in particular that is the subject of the visit to Brixton today. The momentary pause in events, I would imagine, because the President is taking his time over the presentations that he's being shown in another room, displays of work by different groups working with ethnic minorities. Now, here's the welcome song. Let's have a listen. Well, quite extraordinary. The national anthem nearly being drowned out by the enthusiasm of the crowd there. Whoops of joy as the President takes his place with Prince Charles on the balcony. Now, we're going to hear from the London Community Gospel Choir, and then later Walnut Tree Walk School. There we are. The flag of a relatively new country formed for its president.
Tell us about the flag, Donald.
Well, it started out as a compromise design immediately after South Africa became a democracy, but it was a joke at first. Everyone called it the Y-front flag, and until it went up on the flagpoles, and then immediately the whole country fell in love with it, and now we all like it. And it's got 6 colours in it, which was merely to be a stopgap to incorporate all the various factions, but I think now everyone likes it so much they're going to hang on to it.
the mayor, and the people of Brixton. We have in our country a village called Brixton. And so when I'm here, I think of the ties between you and our own village of the same name. I have looked forward for months now to this visit. And it is literally the fulfillment of a dream that I've been able to visit this place. Although many of you in this audience are comparatively young and may not have taken place in the anti-apartheid struggle, but I want to tell you that the United Kingdom, especially London, and the community of Brixton were the heartland of the anti-apartheid struggle. We have won our struggle as a result of the cumulative effect of many factors. And one of these factors were the operations of the anti-apartheid struggle in this country. I therefore want to congratulate and to compliment you for having regarded the question of the liberation of South Africa, a country which is thousands of miles across the seas away from you. You nevertheless regarded that as your own struggle. And it gives me great pleasure to be able to stand on this soil and to thank you for what you did. But I know of your sacrifices in order to ensure that we're free in our country. But the anti-apartheid struggle is needed even more now that we're freedom. There are certain problems which we are facing as a young democracy, which requires us to continue to get the support of the international community generally, and the people of the United Kingdom in particular, including you here. And we hope that you will rally to our appeal when we say that the anti-apartheid struggle must again stand on its feet and continue to help us to entrench our democracy. Finally, in thanking the Prince of Wales for having started this project, that is an initiative we expect from a member of the Royal House who occupies his position. And I hope to have the opportunity one of these days to congratulate both Her Majesty and the Royal Highness, the Duke of Edinburgh, for having brought about this young man. And finally, I want to assure you that I love each and every one of you here without exception. Thank you. Thank you. Elsewhere, I have said on a number of occasions that I wish I had big pockets so that when I leave, I can take all of you and put them in my pockets and go back to South Africa with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, good morning. If you're just tuning our way to Sky News, we've put usual programming aside to bring you these pictures, quite extraordinary scenes. Nelson Mandela concluding his state visit to Britain this Friday with, first of all, a visit to the Brixton Recreation Centre, which, as you are seeing now, is going extraordinarily well. Later, he'll be in Trafalgar Square, and he's once again expected to address the crowds there as he makes his way into South Africa House and appears on the balcony there. But for the moment, we're enjoying the sights and the sounds of Brixton.
Check 2.
Creating the triangle of trade from Europe to Africa through to the Caribbean, we give you Jamaica's finest son, invoice Freddie McGregor. Greetings, Brixton. We say viva Mr. Mandela. Oh my gosh, yeah. So everybody just run come for take it. But Mr. Mandela don't have it already. Hey man, not time for you get steady, cause everybody now. So everybody just run come for take it. But Mr. Mandela don't have it already. Hey man, not time for you get steady, cause everybody don't know Jaja. Sing out Africa world. Oh yeah, here I come. Repeat it again. Africa world. Oh well, here I come. Oh my gosh. Say Ethiopia land is best of all. Repatriate, make we take it all. Enough land out there for each and every one. Work hard and make we do it in a yard. Africa world. Oh well, here I come, Mr. Mandela again. Africa world. Oh now, here I come. So here is how we gonna take it. We make our tracks up to North Africa, and then we forward down to South Africa. We make a move over West Africa, and then we end up in Ethiopia. Africa, boy, oh now, here I come, repeat it again. Africa, boy, oh well, here I come, whoa, whoa, boy, now. Not south and west tonight. President Mandela, same and the best. Whoa, 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 now, yeah. Say Ethiopia land is best of all. Repatriate, make we take it all. Enough land out here for each and every one. Work hard and make we do it in a yard. Africa, boy, oh now, here I come, the president again. Africa, boy, oh well, here I come, mixing me down, cause so when we go there, we not run living. A judge know say, we are forget it. Say when we go there, say we not run living. A judge know say, we are forget it. The boss always want to be richer, while the poor man enslavement suffer, but that can't work.
You're watching Sky News. Welcome to Brixton, where we're taking you live for the culmination of the state visit of South African President Nelson Mandela. Extraordinary scenes there in Brixton, where hundreds of people have turned out to greet him. President Mandela's in the Brixton Recreation Centre, which was built following the race riots there in the 1980s. And today it's the centre that he's chosen to get his message across to the young people of Brixton and to say thank you to them for their support during his years of exile and the continued fight against apartheid in South Africa. In a heartfelt speech, he said that he congratulated the people for having continued to help in a struggle so many thousands of miles away, which everyone had identified nonetheless as a struggle of their own. Now,
He's been meeting other dignitaries, of course, and various other people who've been lined up to meet him. The Prince's Trust volunteers, Elizabeth Crowther-Hunt, the Chief Executive of the Prince's Trust, is there, plus Prince's Trust Action, Arwin Thomas, the director of that particular branch of the organisation, and the Prince's Youth Business Trust, Bob Austin, who's the South London area manager, amongst the people trying to tell the President through the music of some of the work of the Prince's Trust.
a few moments ago, Nelson Mandela addressed the crowd there. He told them that he loved them, every one of them, and they chanted back that they loved him. Donald Woods is with us in the studio, South African journalist. This isn't a man who gives speeches off the script, is it?
No, you know, he just speaks straight from the heart, and they respond directly. And what's very important to him on this visit is to say thanks to people in Britain who helped the anti-apartheid struggle. He keeps referring to this. Thank you, those who helped. And what a shame that 2/3 of the great trio of the great old churchmen, that is Trevor Huddleston, Canon John Collins, Reverend Michael Scott, who played such a leading role in that 2 of them are dead. Because these are the 3 I'm sure he has in mind when he thanks people for having helped them with fees to pay lawyers, to defend political prisoners and that sort.
He said that he'd been looking forward to this visit to Brixton for many months. Why is that?
Well, because Brixton to South Africans represents racial tensions in Britain. Brixton is what they see as the racial trouble spot here, and so to them, how things go in Brixton signifies how race relations go in Britain, in the minds of South Africans.
Also on this visit, Nelson Mandela is talking to people about race initiatives that can be introduced in the area and to see how he can help there. Herman Ousley from the Commission for Racial Equality being one of the guests that he's been meeting this morning. And as we've become accustomed to on this state visit, hasn't given up the chance for a dance. Still early in the morning, but he can't resist it, can he? And the lovely thing is the infectious way that he gets everybody involved.
He's a mover. Not just a shaker, but a mover. I noticed his daughter too. You know, she's the Princess Zenani. Is married to a Swazi prince, of whom there are many Swazi princes, so there are quite a lot of Swazi princesses as well. But she is one of the 2 daughters of Nelson and Winnie Madikizela, that was. And Zinzi is the other one. This is Zenani, and she now acts as his hostess on such trips.
Because Winnie's
no longer. Right, yes.
I suppose that's something that Nelson Mandela and Prince Charles may have some time to talk about, troubles in their marriages, as the royal divorce is expected to be announced later.
Zenani looks a lot like her mother. She's a very striking person, and also a terrific speaker. I've heard her speak a couple of times. Quite a personality.
She looks very much like she's enjoying the visit as well.
Yes.
Donald, thank you for the moment. This is live. Here is the President taking to the streets.
Nelson Mandela going for a walkabout in the famous Brixton market. Which you can see there, he's just coming down from the recreation centre. And he's going to meet the people, hundreds of people who turned out from very early this morning to greet him. Donald Woods, we've heard in his speech Nelson Mandela say how much it means to him to be in Brixton, the scene for many people, the epitome of racial struggle in Britain. What does it mean for the people of Brixton to have Nelson Mandela there?
A very great deal, I think, because, first of all, it puts Brixton on the map in such a concentrated way internationally. And secondly, because he is, after all, the leading role model or black hero of the world. And so I would think would be identified with by so many black people. And in fact, not only black people in South Africa. We found the whites are as enthusiastic for him as the blacks are. And so he does exert this following over all sectors. But I would think that someone, a young person in Brixton, with potential idealism, maybe in public service, would look to someone like that as a role model, and he might well be inspired thereby to stand for Parliament or to take up a public career.
Your point there on him appealing to all races is very relevant here, because we can see that this crowd is a mixed race crowd.
Well, Brixton is that, like, I mean, there's this image abroad that Brixton is all black, and of course we know it isn't. Maybe predominantly in parts, but it's a very mixed suburb of London, isn't it?
And that will be important to Nelson Mandela, not
Absolutely.
only to address the black people of Brixton, but the the white people who
Yes,
have
this
supported him
multiracial
as
community,
well.
that's right.
This has very much characterized his tour, hasn't it? The very informal and jovial nature of it.
Yes, and we were struck the way the Queen in the carriage the other day left it all to him to do the waving and stuff. And she, almost with a measure of relief, I think, thought, oh boy, I can have a rest now.
Well, I'm sure Prince Charles doesn't mind, but he has, in effect, been eclipsed in this visit today, hasn't he? He really has.
Yes. And, you know, just looking at these scenes we were watching there on the left of the screen is Aziz Pahad, one of Mandela's ministers. And it's so hilarious to see these former criminals, these former political criminals, all in the cabinet now. And you walk around the streets of South Africa and you see these once reviled enemies of the state are now running the place.
And there has been some serious work going on, isn't there, behind the scenes, away from the colourful visit of the figurehead, the president himself. He did bring a huge entourage of government ministers and other civil servants and so on to try and kickstart this relationship between British businessmen and businessmen from the whole of Europe, indeed, to become more involved in the South African economy.
Yes, you know, it doesn't really require much of a kickstart because Britain is already the biggest trading partner in South Africa, has been for a long time. There's always been a massive economic involvement there, and a two-way thing. Now it's going more vigorously, even from South Africa's side. I mentioned earlier, I was talking about wines. 800% increase in export of South African wines to Europe. 800%. This is in the last 18 months to 2 years.
And in return, you're going to eat our beef.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you mentioned it,
Maybe.
actually we could.
Yeah.
South Africa could send a lot of very good beef over if you ever run short.
There's also a privatisation programme, which I know the government wants to get into one day with some of the utilities, as we have done in this country, some of the utilities being privatised, and I'm sure expertise, if not the actual companies themselves, but the expertise involved in that would be most useful to the...
Yes, there's a lot of technical assistance sought, and there's a lot of, in the last 3 or 4 days, as you mentioned, a lot of horse trading going on below the scenes of these festivities. I know a couple of my friends who are with the official delegation have been working more than playing.
Well, it's a privilege for a president, of course, to get all the best bits, I suppose, and why not? There he is, the presidential entourage, moving through into the market. Police bringing up the Rolls-Royce that the president is to use to leave Brixton and make his way to Trafalgar Square. I don't think he'll be needing that just yet, but preparations have been made.
We've heard very much on this visit, Donald, the theme of thanking people. That's going to be immensely important in Trafalgar Square, isn't it?
Yes.
The scene of all those vigils years ago.
Yes. And also, you know, a lot of younger people don't realise to what extent London, down the centuries, in fact, has been the host city. In fact, I can speak with personal experience, the place where exiles tend to come. And from Africa alone, London has hosted, you know, the likes of Nkrumah and many other African leaders, and many of the countries of Africa, heads of state, were formerly protected in London because of their dissidents back home. And I think that's also part of his thanks. He's thanking London and British people on behalf of these people down the years. I remember there was a poem once about that, someone who wrote, a German or French exile who wrote, "England is the place I know where those with brave hearts may go." And that was 200 years ago. So there's quite a good track record in that respect of looking after exile.
Tell us a little about your own experience.
Well, mine was relatively easy because I had visited Britain before as a young journalist, and I'd worked on Fleet Street, so I'd almost learnt the language, and I could almost speak like one of the natives here. But when my family and I had to get out of South Africa, it meant that we did have friends here, and we were very courteously and helpfully treated, and we were able to reconstruct our lives here. So we feel immensely grateful. And we're now nationality of both countries, and very much The only time this ever gives me a problem is when South Africa's playing rugby against England, and then I want South Africa to win. Rugby and cricket, but against everyone else I'll root for England.
Well, the President almost lost in the crowd there. Prince Charles I can just about see. Folks from the marketplace. I know that Joe Rowe, who's chair of the Station Road Market Traders Strategy Group, was supposed to be one of those who met the President. Whether he got through the throng, I'm not sure. Let's just leave Brixton just temporarily and show you the scenes in Trafalgar Square, where more people anxious to have their moment to see President Mandela. And this is where the President is due to go next. And it's going to be Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, who's going to be looking after him here. The Duke is due to arrive in about the next 10 minutes or so, ready to escort the President, where it has been quite deliberately planned that the President should make his way right across the square to South Africa House and up to the balcony for an address to the crowd there. We're back live in Brixton now, and as you can see, the police pushing the motorcade, the Rolls-Royce, through to meet the President, and the President and his daughter due to get back in the car now and make their way to Trafalgar Square. Prince Charles apparently going to make other arrangements. He leaves the ceremonial at this point. And will there be much interest, Donald, in those people watching these pictures in South Africa, in seeing that there obviously is some considerable warmth, if ever that was in doubt, and Britain, of course, hasn't been necessarily the most helpful country to South Africa through the years, but if there's any ever doubt, no doubt these pictures reassuring folk back in South Africa.
Yes, I thought you were talking climatically, because they've been having snow in parts of South Africa the last few days.
Well, they've been enjoying these pictures particularly then.
Right. And I think London the last few days has been a bit like Durban, and it's humid, at its most humid. But yeah, there's a lot of warmth, both climatical and in human relations. The people of South Africa do feel pretty close to the British people, not only for obvious reasons of history, but because of the shared sports culture and language, of course. One of our languages is English, one of our many official languages. And in fact, it's the political language of South Africa. It's a language most South Africans tend to speak in politics. Even in the years of the struggle for freedom from apartheid, Africans, whether Xhosa, Zulu, Swazi, whatever, Sotho, tended to speak in most contexts in English, because that was the common language of most of them.
Let's enjoy some of the language of music now. This is some pictures we recorded a little bit earlier on, and Mr. Mandela was enjoying himself again. Now, this is quite impromptu, happening in between movements from one bit of the hall to another.
And early in the day as well to be bopping away, but not so for Nelson Mandela.
He gets up about 5 o'clock first morning.
Yes, and seems to start dancing very early too, by all accounts, from what we've seen. Where does this vivaciousness come from? Is this because of all those years in exile, or is this the personality anyway?
Well, you know, you just start music going, and most South Africans will start gyrating. And he's very typical in that respect. Also, I think he's a naturally pretty vigorous person. You know, you talk of early morning exercise routine. It's not all that early to be jumping around like this. Mm.
Prince Charles wasn't tempted to join in, although he does appear to have been enjoying this trip enormously too.
Well, that's a hug for them to remember, I'm sure. Well, those pictures were recorded a little while ago. The President now making his way from Brixton. I'm sure the Rolls-Royce are making rather slow progress through the streets, but then heading back to Trafalgar Square. We'll be live in Trafalgar Square in a few moments. But a visit that has been marked with some symbolism and a particularly warm welcome, and one I'm sure that the President will remember for some years to come.
Oh, I think so. I think it's been one he's looked forward to especially. Although he likes visiting other countries, I think this one had a special meaning for him. And I think he also felt there were a lot of unpaid debts he wanted to to pay to the anti-apartheid movement here, to the great old churchmen who helped them at a time when Christianity wasn't all that militantly pro-justice. You had these great old Anglicans, Trevor Huddleston, John Collins, Michael Scott, leading the way. And I think that a lot of black South Africans, most of whom are Christian religion, responded to that. The Anglican Church in South Africa was always in the forefront of education, and of course through people like Huddleston and others, stood up early in that situation there, long before other denominations did.
And Nelson Mandela, of course, has been staying as a guest at Buckingham Palace, a far cry from his tiny prison cell in Robben Island all those years ago. Presumably that would have been enormously important to him.
It's a far cry too from his home in Kunu in the Transkei, which is a very small place. I remember as a kid we used to go past there to school, and then as the years went by we were pointed out these huts, and they said that's the home of the notorious you know, terrorist or criminal Nelson Mandela. So yeah, it's a far cry from his origins, but he carries it off with a sort of natural bearing, I think, you know. Nothing phases him. Doesn't take himself too seriously, and I think that's the key. He's not, it's like someone said of Lord Goodman, is impossible to flatter.
Well, I'm just reading, actually, some news which might be met with some raised eyebrows in some quarters, that Baroness Thatcher apparently met Nelson Mandela at his quarters in Buckingham Palace this morning, at his request.
Oh, that's nice.
So he's met all leaders of the political parties here in Britain, and a surprising visit from Baroness Thatcher, one would have thought, because the view, I'm sure, from many wouldn't be that she was particularly helpful to his cause.
Well, I suppose he now sees that he can be friendly with the Afrikaner nationalists who caused him a lot of hassle for so many years, and so he can afford to compromise with maybe said, Maggie, all is forgiven.
A forgiving man by nature, you think?
Maybe. Oh yes, I'm sure he is.
She was certainly amongst the audience in Westminster Hall yesterday to listen to his speech.
But I think he does take the view, to an extent to which some have criticised him for, of saying the past is over, let's look forward now, there isn't time for recriminations, let's all join forces now and get things done. And it's probably in that spirit that he chatted to her if he got a chance to get a word in edgeways.
Looking forward to his work now in South Africa, and what are the main difficulties that he now must encounter?
The unemployment rate is very high. The rate of crime in the major cities is unacceptably high. And this is not because suddenly more South Africans have become criminals. It's because crime has been depoliticized, in the sense what used to be a very high crime rate in the townships is now no longer just restricted to the townships. So the whites are starting to experience what blacks experienced for so long. So there are the main problems: unemployment, the crime rate, and educational and health needs are enormous. So it's quite a bag full of things, but I think they've got the zeal and the know-how and the wherewithal to tackle these problems.
How would you describe the atmosphere of modern South Africa?
It's a mixture of extreme hopefulness and extreme apprehension on the part of some. And yet, when you travel around the country, there's so much that's reassuring. It's only when you get into certain situations in some of the big cities, or you look at some of the situations of young people who can't get work, that you realize the negative side. But most of it is positive.
Donald Woods, South African journalist and long campaigner against apartheid. Thanks very much for the moment.
Good afternoon, this is Sky News, and this is President Mandela arriving in Trafalgar Square.
Nelson Mandela is going to walk right across Trafalgar Square, greeting the crowds who've turned out to cheer him. His host for this section of his visit is the Duke of York. Also there you can see Councillor Robert Davis, the Lord Mayor of Westminster, and Virginia Bottomley, the Secretary of State for National Heritage. Nelson Mandela has been accompanied on this trip by his daughter, Princess Sinani. This is the culmination of his visit to Britain. This morning he was in Brixton, dancing and chatting to the hundreds who turned out there to see him. He chose Brixton, the scene of racial tension in Britain, those riots of the 1980s. He chose Brixton to say thank you to all the people who'd helped his struggle for racial equality so many thousands of miles away. Trafalgar Square, of course, being so significant because it's the home of South Africa House, which for years epitomised the struggle against apartheid. For years was the scene of vigils for President Nelson Mandela, who at that time was imprisoned in Robben Island.
People were starting to fill the square very early this morning. The bells of St. Martin's in the Fields were pealing quite loudly as the first of the people here who gathered to see the President took their place and tried to get a good vantage point. It's overwhelming, said one of them, to have him here after all those years of demonstrating. It's a day of high emotion for all of us to see him here being revered by so many people.
Move back, chaps, please.
Joining us in the studio is the South African journalist Donald Woods. Hello to you again.
Hello.
What do you think he will say to the people in his address here this afternoon?
Well, he'll probably elaborate on his thanks to them that he was giving earlier in Brixton, and especially in the setting of Trafalgar Square, which is the scene of so many demonstrations. I'm sure he'll allude to that. And so, in a way, this is the final thank you in the symbolic part of the visit.
Our correspondent down there, Simon McCoy, felt he may make some reference to his dark days in prison. Tell us a little about those days.
He might do that, although he tends not to talk much about that time. Very little of what he's said or written has been about his time in imprisonment. Robben Island for so many years is a very forbidding place. I remember going there once as a law student to play cricket before it was a political prison. Actually, it was a political prison 200 years ago when Makana was imprisoned there. Then it became a leper colony. Then it was a military garrison. Then it became a political prison again. I think it's about to be decommissioned in a number of ways. But in those days, the South African Air Force used to send a Shackleton bomber over the island at 4 o'clock to remind the black prisoners that white technology was in charge. And so these prisoners had to build up their own sense of being aware of developments in South Africa. He has told me they were able to follow events on the mainland in spite of all the restrictions on information. I think they had a clever system of purloining newspapers from the warders' houses, and they'd do it, you know, by rotation so that one particular warder wouldn't be targeted too often too soon. So they did stay aware of events in the world, and that may well be in his mind when he no doubt would have heard on Robben Island of protests in Trafalgar Square, and now we'll get a chance to say thanks in Trafalgar Square.
This is the man we know as Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
But he has some other names too.
Well, yes, Nelson was his school name that his teacher gave him. His birth name was Rolihlahla, which means, well, there's a lot of argument about what it means. Ihlahla in Xhosa is a broom or besom made of twigs to sweep a place. So you could say Hola means bring out, Rolihlahla means bring out the broom, clean the place up. It's also a nickname for a troublemaker. Then his clan name is Madiba. He's a member of the Madibas, Madiba clan. Then his initiation name, when he was initiated, entered manhood at the age of 16, is Dalibunga. Now, a bunga, this is prophetic because a bunga is a parliament. And to Dalibunga means prepare the parliament, make ready the parliament. So someone must have known something when he was 15. That's right.
What was in store for this man? Well, he's enjoying the occasion, as we can see, and the people who gathered in Trafalgar Square enjoying it too. Never, as any leading statesman these days, without security, of course. He has to take particular care. The Duke of York just following in Nelson Mandela's footsteps across this famous square. And that is where this man's obviously at his very best. Never mind officialdom, with respect, never mind royalty. It's the people that he seems to enjoy meeting most.
He often suddenly stops and recognizes somebody, see, and that throws the whole schedule out.
Privately, when you meet him at home, is he just as vivacious?
Absolutely, and also in his presidential office where I remember the day after his inauguration, felt very privileged to get just a few minutes with him in there. And it was just the thought of being in that office where P.W. Botha and Forster then used to say, over our dead bodies will the ANC rule this place. And he just burst out laughing at the thought that he was now in this office. He's got a great relish for life, I think.
And a sense of humour?
Great, it's a terrific sense of humour. Very alive to you know, and you can see it in the way he responds to people. It's usually on the humorous side. It's seldom that solemn sort of acknowledgement.
When you say that he doesn't talk much about his time in prison, why do you think that is?
Well, he's written very movingly about it in his book, of course, which I think is one of the most extraordinary biographies of our time. And he's, I think, tended to put it all into that rather than talk about it in interviews. And also because of what we were talking about earlier about his readiness to see Margaret Thatcher. He's prepared to forget the past. He's prepared to forgive those who didn't agree with him. And he's very much a person who looks forward. And that's why I think he doesn't dwell too long on his prison days at the moment, although he may have written about it extensively before. He may refer to it briefly today because, as I say, that this is Trafalgar Square was the scene of the protest to try and get him freed.
And many of these people who are here today will have been in Trafalgar Square then, as part of those vigils which were mounted.
One of the great things you experience in South Africa House these days is so many of us in there, and you always find the old stagers looking out the window and saying, that's where we used to stand outside. And now it's ours. Yes, that's right.
Well, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Betty Boothroyd, alluded to that. She certainly took part in supporting the anti-apartheid thrust from this country, as she mentioned in the Westminster Hall speech she made yesterday.
I was so glad she referred to the Black Sash organisation, because these were, you know, if someone was doing a humorous film, they'd all be Margaret Rutherfords, which would not be an accurate depiction, but it was the white privileged women of South Africa who said no and who really stood up when it was dangerous to. And I was very glad that they got a tribute.
Well, now, once inside the building, it's the chairman of the Silver Jubilee Walkway Trust, Mr. Neville Labovich, who is next to make an official greeting for the president. And another unveiling ceremony he has to do inside. Then a pause, I would imagine, as the president makes his way up to the balcony. And of course, we'll stay with this coverage to bring you exactly what the president has to say.
He's very open, isn't he, in the way that he greets people and addresses people. Would you describe him as an open man generally?
Absolutely, and very, does not like excluding anyone. I mean, a little later this afternoon, all our families are going to be with him at the sort of private South African shindig. And I was just thinking, for a man of 78, after all this ceremonial of this day, I mean, many of us would be exhausted already.
Yes.
But he's going to be there sort of emoting and sharing his time with so many families and younger members of these families who will want to have a word or two with him.
It's on to France tomorrow as well, so the work doesn't stop.
That's right. It doesn't. I don't think it stops. maybe a few brief moments in the air.
Tell us about the private occasion this afternoon. What will happen there?
There's like a tea party at Highveld House, which is the South African High Commissioner's private residence. And that is essentially for, you know, Theati's visit has been meeting most of the British people and some of us who were at some of the events, but this afternoon is like the South African party. Although I'm sure, again, there'll be many non-South Africans there, because a lot of these things have been spilling over, and that's quite a nice aspect of this visit.
more warm words. Our colleague down at Trafalgar Square apparently tried to, or did get a word with the President as he walked past. He did agree that the welcome he's had in this country was quite extraordinary, extremely warm, and he ventured to suggest it was probably warmer than the time when the Queen went to South Africa last year, the reaction down there. So Britain returning the compliment and some. Now there's a photo opportunity. That was the spot of many an all-night visual.
You know, one of the slogans of the anti-apartheid people in South Africa was "the people shall govern." And in the last days of apartheid, the police sprayed the demonstrating crowd with purple dye. So they started chanting, "the purple will govern."
The purple will govern, indeed.
Balloons there being released into the skies, as you can see, another symbol of freedom.
President just inquiring as to which is the makeup of a particular section of the crowd, I think. Who are those people he's asking?
Is he like this? Does he like to take a very personal and very in-depth interest in his
Yes,
visits and
full of
his people who are
questions,
meeting him?
Well, he'd certainly know about his namesake on the column, I think. You won't have to ask about that.
Yeah, it's been the subject of quite a few jokes, hasn't it, this week?
Well, not many people know that Lord Nelson spent a part of his youthful service in South Africa, in Simonstown Naval Base.
Who regarded the entire globe as the battleground of their efforts, as the theater of their operation. They fight the suppression of human rights whenever that has occurred in any part of the world. We have been the beneficiaries of such men and women throughout the world, but in particular from the United Kingdom. The anti-apartheid movement was most powerful in this city. And I dare say, without any exaggeration, that had it not been for the efforts of the anti-apartheid movement in this city in particular, the cost of liberation would have been very hard. But I wanted to appeal to you that the task of the anti-apartheid struggle is not ended. We are facing, in certain respects, a far more difficulty than we had during the anti-apartheid struggle. To govern, to solve problems now as members of a government is not very easy. And we need the support of people in a country which has been the pillar of democracy for centuries. And I want you to know that this morning I had breakfast with Archbishop Trafalgar, and I told him that we don't want him to return to South Africa as he wants, that we want him to remain here so that he can again be the rallying point of the anti-apartheid forces in the new role that they have to assume. And I hope that all of you will accept that you have an important role to play in our country. I am here with Prince Andrew, and I have just returned from Brixton, where I mixed with the masses of the people here, with the Prince of Wales. He has done remarkable work in that community, and I am really impressed by the efforts that he made. And I expect Prince Andrew will impress the entire world, certainly for us in peace another time. When he went to the False Island, piloted helicopters there, and shared the same experiences with other young men who decided to defend their country. I hope that he will be very much involved in the efforts to strengthen the anti-apartheid movement, because we want the help of people who have had the training, the skills, the techniques, and the experience of running a country. And I thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, my bosses don't want me to continue.
President Nelson Mandela in Trafalgar Square there, thanking the people who for many years stood there to protest against apartheid, and also saying that the struggle against apartheid is not over, and that in some respects the problems his country is facing now are more difficult than they were during the anti-apartheid days. Donald Woods in the studio, explain exactly what he means by that.
Well, his theme is that the legacy of apartheid, although apartheid itself is now dead, that its legacy lives on in a number of respects in the consequences of the apartheid years, and in a way, the centuries of racism that went even before the apartheid codification of racial laws. And that was to produce generations of blacks who are uneducated, unskilled, not allowed to participate in any form of government, not allowed to acquire certain training because of the color of their skins. And so now we can't suddenly say, oh, the whole nation's freed, therefore they should be surging ahead on all sides now. He's saying we must acknowledge that for many of the former victims of apartheid, there are obstacles, there are chains around their legs we still have to cut off. We've got to empower them through education and through training and through opportunity. And I think that's what he means.
He's chatting there with the Duke of York, and he paid tribute to Prince Charles for the work that he'd done in Brixton. Is he saying then really that this is now a more subtle form of racism that is perhaps more difficult to expose and to overcome?
No, I don't think he's actually saying it's a matter of racism today so much as the consequences of the apartheid era. And that man on the right there, the High Commissioner for South Africa, it's Mandela Simang, whose first name is called Mandela because of the troop ship that sank in World War I. The British government asked for more South African soldiers, and the only ones left that they could send were black troops. 3,000 of them were sent, and the troop ship sunk in the English Channel, and that ship called the Mandela is commemorated by the name of the present High Commissioner.
Just meeting Virginia Bottomley again as the official party take their leave of the President. Virginia Bottomley, Secretary of State for National Heritage, of course, and you saw the Lord Mayor of Westminster, that's Councillor Robert Davis, also saying their au revoirs, having escorted the President across the square and to the door of South Africa House. Shortly, the Duke of York will also say his au revoirs.
Well,
The President has his own idea what the agenda really is, you see.
It's a praise song starting up, Chocholoza, a praise of Mandela.
One that was conceived in his years in prison?
Oh, yes, you used to hear it quite often. You used to hear it in Trafalgar Square quite often, too. It really was one of the leading songs of the liberation movement. South Africa's got a very
to his
strong
ears
choral.
then and today.
Yes, it's choral music's very strong in South Africa, and it's a real feature of life there.
Just to underline your words, Donald, we're just reminded, of course, that earlier this week at Downing Street at the press conference we brought you outside number 10. President Mandela was asked how he felt about some of the accusations he's faced, of course, in years gone by, and in particular those of Lady Thatcher, of course, who hasn't in the past fought shy of declaring what she thought terrorists were terrorists. He told reporters on that occasion, well, let bygones be bygones, and that really does seem to be a theme of this man, doesn't he? That that was then, this is now.
That's right.
Let's get on with today. And obviously, in some of the remarks he made just before he unveiled the panel, a panoramic panel that's just been unveiled outside South Africa House. We saw that happen. He made a little impromptu speech about that. Once again, let's look forward, he seems to say.
He's done this with the former wives of, like Dr. Verwoerd's widow and Mrs. Straynham, and people, you know, you just wouldn't have expected. He's gone out of his way to talk to these people who were his sworn enemies before, as part of this attempt to let bygones be bygones. So I'm not entirely surprised that he has spoken to Mrs. Thatcher.
He has, of course, been meeting Mrs. Thatcher, and she has said that she's very impressed by his sincerity and total absence of bitterness and his resolve always to move forwards.
Has made it up the stairs very quickly indeed and is addressing the crowd.
Is the emergence of men and women all over the globe, in all continents, who fight the suppression of human rights. Those men and women have chosen the entire world as the battlefield of their operation, as the theater of all their efforts. Many communities in the world now have been able to solve their problems because of the efforts of those men and women who have vision, who have courage to stand for the truth, and who are prepared to suffer for it. We have been in South Africa the beneficiaries of the efforts and activities of such men and women all over the world. But as you all know, the anti-apartheid movement was most powerful in the United Kingdom and in this city. As your servant, have come to thank you